barcodes. I learned about what are barcodes? Everybody uses them. Companies use them to track inventory, to track the origins of inventory. If something should be considered bad or need to be recalled, they knew who to recall it from. So here I am in Iraq on an objective, and there's like a thing with a barcode on it. I was all about barcodes. I knew everything about barcodes. And so I used it to find the company, who paid for it, who picked it up, where did it get mailed to, who mailed to those addresses. You just keep working your way out. But I had to study a piece of information and learn way out here about inventory control to come way in here to improve the security program.
What's going down, everyone? This is Dr. Erik Huffman with the Mike Club, and I am honored and privileged, like wholeheartedly, to be here with MJ Thomas, who was a former SES FBI agent assigned to the Pentagon. Yes. Totally butchered that. Totally butchered that. Can you correct what I just absolutely destroyed and tell us what that is?
No, you got most of it right. So I am a retired FBI agent, like 18 months ago, but I was a senior executive in the FBI assigned to the Pentagon to serve as a liaison between the FBI, National Security Division, and Department of Defense. So anything that had to do with counterterrorism or counterintelligence or national security, and it crossed over, the FBI and Department of Defense. I was there to kind of facilitate that transfer of information.
Well, so how did you get there? I know it's a mouthful to say, and it sounds very intimidating to someone when you first hear that, like, oh my goodness, like how did you get there? Because I'm sure there's, myself included, there's a handful of people curious, like, I would have loved to do that someday. How did you get there?
I would say master the push-up and like to run long distances, and you'll get there, Seriously. I mean, I started my career in the military. I've been to 3 police academies, and that doesn't include my military training. I started as enlisted, then I got commissioned, all the schools I had to go there, the police academy, logistician, air base ground defense. And then, I came out of the military and went to a civilian police academy, and then joined the FBI and went to the FBI Academy. And so seriously, if you don't like running and doing push-ups, you're never going to make it to the Pentagon, okay, as an SES to the
FBI. Never gotta get that workout and that nutrition plan going.
Correct. So, that's kind of I laugh because it's a little bit part of it. You have to really, my experience comes from the military and from law enforcement. And then, of course, obviously a career in the FBI. And being one of those people, and it's kind of my quote, but I think I see it other places, so I think people stole it from me. I am absolutely uncomfortable being uncomfortable. You know what I mean? So if you're always afraid to leave your comfort zone, I don't think you're going to make it to the Pentagon either. You know what I mean? You just kind of constantly be telling yourself, I am totally uncomfortable today, like I am with you on this call. And knowing that I might muck it up, but hey, that's what experience is.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I love that. I embrace myself. I think I stole it from you as well. Just being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Just gotta be willing to take on new things, take risks, take different chances without knowing the outcome. Like, hey, you may be
Right.
successful. You may collapse in mile 2 or something like that,
Yes.
trying to keep up. But during your time as a SESer with the FBI, your one of your main focuses, from my understanding, was inside threat, correct?
So insider threat as it pertains to the theft of defense research and defense technology. So basically companies have intellectual property. It doesn't matter who you are. It's the secret sauce of your company. And my job was to identify the different vectors by which an insider or an adversary or a competitor might steal your intellectual property. And so the FBI, did lots of investigations. I think Director Ray spoke last week publicly about, we currently have over 2,000, the FBI has over 2,000 investigations right now just on the theft of critical technology. And one of those ways to steal it is an insider.
Wow. As you analyze inside threat, how do you formulate the risk? How do you think about risk when it comes in part of inside threat? Because from my understanding, possibly ignorantly so, I know we come from two different worlds at looking at something very similar. There's a level of risk that you have to accept, because if you have the right to look at it, if you have the clearance to look at it, the job title and all that, you can and you will, especially if you need to do your job, if your job is relying on so. But I'm curious, how'd you look at the risk of the inside threat, the risk of personnel looking at something they possibly should, and the risk of adversaries possibly spoofing in, whether it's something cyber or whether it's something physical?
So those are like all the vectors, you could have someone stick a thumb drive in and it executes some file on your system, and then someone can get remote access. You could have, like you said, a genuine trusted person who all of a sudden decides one day they're not so trusted anymore, like Snowden. And so I manage the risk, because if you're going to be in security or risk management or cyber, it's not one and done. And that's the thing I've been trying to tell people. I tell my people, we get together, I read like the latest headlines, I see some company got compromised or ransomware or whatever it is, and I start going down the line and saying, maybe do we understand how this was accomplished, and go back to the table and make sure all our holes are plugged and our buttons are turned on. Like I said, I'm not a programmer. And we keep revisiting the threat. And then I say, do you think there's maybe we're exposed some way? Do we have, our visitor Wi-Fi, is that exposed in some way? We have visitors come in, do we make sure they don't have technology on them? When we send someone overseas, we make sure they don't travel with a company laptop with all the secret sauce on it, or their phone with the president's phone number and home address in it. So you need to constantly be checking the boxes and going around and starting all over again.
Yeah, I think I love that. I think that's critical. I think a lot of organizations, I won't say most, I'm pretty sure there's a handful of people listening that have created their risk register, conducted their risk assessments, did it absolutely fantastically 3 years ago. and
Right.
and I imagine you consistently looked at that, conducted risk assessments, and adjusted it so per. Was that an annual, weekly, monthly basis? I imagine different risks require different amounts of attention.
I think what we're talking about two different things now. Like when you say someone did something 3 years ago, I would say that's compliance. They're required annually, they're required every other year. That's the compliance baseline, bare minimum. You have to have this done. And so compliance, I do some compliance, or my people do. But my job's not done after that checklist is completed and we send it in and we can kick back for 2 years. I'm a threat hunter. I'm a risk hunter. You know what I mean? I'm aggressively looking for it. I'm teaching my people to look for it. I don't think some companies, outside of the Department of Defense or, you could just be some small company that really thinks about counterintelligence and thinks that, we make a special paint, you know what I mean? You draw on it and wipe it off. Nobody wants that. Well, maybe somebody really does want that. So that's your intellectual property, and you need to figure out how to protect that. And you have to think of like counterintelligence methods, like we call them non-traditional collectors. You have a person coming in to fix your machine, to make sure it's calibrated correctly. And they see that you put so much percentage of each of these elements into your formula to make it be your secret sauce. Okay, well, they could steal that. And so you need to really understand how much of exposure you're giving to an outside person who's not entirely vetted to your secret source, your intellectual property.
Yeah, I think I agree. Compliance does not equal security. It's
No.
not. Compliance means you're compliant, doesn't actually mean you secure. I would further this notion one step forward, is that I think there's a confusion as well with compliance and security, but also with privacy and security. Just because something's private doesn't mean it's secure, and just because it's secure doesn't actually mean it's private. For an example I would use is like a house. You have your house and your window is closed and your window is locked, so that's secure. Is it private? No, because the window's made of glass. So you can still see in. And I love that you articulated the balance of the compliance side and the security side. And you say you are a threat hunter. What tips do you have? What do you look for without? I know there's some things you can say, some things you cannot. What tips you have at a generalist level if someone's listening and they hear it like, hey, threat hunter, I would love to be able to analyze a threat, but I don't really know how. What few things do you look for? Do you have any tips, any advice on how to start analyzing a threat?
I think you need to just kind of do a baseline risk assessment of where you are. So, if you're talking about, your access control or your visitor control, who do you let in and who don't you let into your facility if you have a secure facility? We have strict rules because we're a defense contracted on foreign persons coming into our facility. So they can come in, but they have to be vetted a certain way. So that's like a lane, and review those rules and make sure your employees understand that. Also, even if now you're a US person coming in, the technology that you bring in with you, cameras, phones, thumb drives, things like that, we don't like technology. You're a company, you might not mind it, but you don't want anybody taking pictures of the big blueprint schematic up on the wall, as you're touring the facility. So that's a lane. Supply chain's another lane. If you're in charge of security, procurement just seems to buy, and I'm not faulting them, they buy the most inexpensive thing. Someone says they need a new television in their office, they buy a new television. I don't want to walk into my office and see a Hisense television on my wall. It's a Chinese state-owned enterprise. You know what I mean? So you might want to, if you have certain parameters in your company, you might not want that. I'm really concerned about remote access these days, especially with vendors. They can remote access in if you're a company that has machinery and things like that. Acquisitions is a big thing right now. Mergers and acquisitions. If a company wants to acquire something, it should go through a certain level of vetting on all those levels. Research and engineering. If you really have something that you're paying a university to do some research, you really have to kind of understand who has access to that research. Because when it goes from kind of like, and from like basic to fundamental to applied research, it's in that sweet spot that before it becomes actually classified or some level of control, that it can be acquired by, a foreign adversary and things like that. We do security clearances here. We vet people's background, and we have to make decisions about how much risk are we willing to assume by bringing that employee in. I think it's different for every company, and you have to manage the risk. But the fact that you're educating yourself and you're saying, I think I'm okay with that because I understand it now, I will accept that level of risk, and then you move on. And then the circuit starts all over again.
Wow. Wow. When you're looking at third parties, because I know you spoke about the Hisense television, and I imagine how far do you go when you're doing your due diligence on a vendor, to say, hey, I want to check organization ABC. Do you look at who the organizations partner with and possibly some of their partners? Because I know there's the third party risk, but there's also the fourth party and fifth party risk, which we the collectively inherently accept. Like if you're going to partner with this third party, inherently you're kind of partnering with their partners as well. How far do you dig before you're okay, I'll accept this risk? I imagine whether it's the government's different than private industry. The private industry might vet the third party and call it good. Do you look one or two steps deeper than that?
Yeah, so for me, it's provenance. Like I need to understand the entire pedigree of the company, because that's a way, like I said, we're a defense contractor. Foreign adversary would potentially get access to us because they acquire a friendly name here in the US that everybody's comfortable with. But behind the scenes, all the data is going back like to Canada and then being shipped to Hong Kong and then going to Beijing, or, being pushed out of some other friendly country into, I'm not trying to name countries or anything, but, to Russia or North Korea, they just get pushed into places that we're not comfortable with. So I have to understand a certain amount of level. But I think other companies also have to understand just the health of a company. I mean, you're counting on this company that you're contracting with to produce your thing. You don't want to like partner with someone who's had a zillion, ransomware, or, some kind of, been taken down by being irresponsible with their cybersecurity protocols, or, how does their company let outside people have access to the thing that you have contracted with them to create? So I'm very, I always say people, you go really high and then you can always let off the gas a little bit, but it's really hard to go in easy and then really hit them hard to like, you have to increase this level of security. So for me, I need to understand the company, who they sub to, who were they 10 years ago, who owns them now, understand the corporate structure.
Wow. I imagine that takes time, and there's a fight, I imagine, that could exist within the rate of the business wanting to be a business and innovate and continuously progress and move forward. Do you find that there's pushback that this process, this process that seems to fit, not to say it doesn't, I agree with it, to be just transparent, I agree with it. But is there pushback of, hey, MJ, this is taking a little too long. We are competitors, not adversaries. Our competitors, business competitors, are innovating and doing this, and this, and we're lacking behind, and it's your fault. Do you see there's a pushback, not to speak where you work currently, but do you feel there's some pushback with that?
Absolutely. So we all gonna know, if you're in security, nobody's a fan of you. Okay. Nobody, they're just not a fan of you. And as soon as something bad happens, they're like, well, look at security, they didn't stop it. You know what I mean? So don't get into security to be popular. You're not popular. But as soon as, crap hits the fan, your phone's gonna ring, and they're gonna want to know why you don't do this. So I am a little overkill, but you have to understand my background. I talked to my company. I said, listen, I'm like security on steroids. I get that. And so I kind of always have to pull it back myself a little bit. But I think when we first chatted, I was always like, if your goal is to lose 10 pounds and you only lose 6, have you really failed? Well, if I go and say I want my security program at the number 10 level and I only get it to like 5, I'm a great success. Yes, there's pushback, and there's pushback between departments. Supply chain doesn't want to, adhere to what cybersecurity and physical security and industrial security, and the people going overseas, none of them want to work together. None of them. None of them want to collaborate, and that's where you have to use your personality to say, listen, guys, we all need to come together to keep all of us secure. I mean, I don't want anybody to get stuck in this situation. So yes, there is pushback. But if you're particularly good, and I kind of hunt in silence, I'll tell you, your first success is going to get you that leverage. You know what I mean? Like, you've identified like something's happening, and you bring it to the attention of your boss, or who you need to report to, and you say, I just identified that this person used to work for our competitor company, and now he's and now he's here. I'm not sure we should do that. And then they'll see the value in you being the annoying security person.
I agree. There was times where there's nothing going on in where I've worked. Thankfully, it wasn't like data breach Wednesdays, so it's just not consistent data breaches or anything like that. But after a while, security becomes really annoying because it's quiet. There's not a lot happening. So it's like security becomes a cost center. Like, we're spending X amount of dollars and nothing's happening. But after something happens, man, the budget just automatically doubles somehow. like where did all this money come from when we were fighting for kind of scraps with our hands out so we could progress forward? So I agree that after you identify something, you show value, and so money will come in, and your projects could potentially get funded easier. Because after a while, security just becomes a cost center if nothing's happening, if you're not demonstrating value. It's hard to show. Security is not the sales department, where sales, John Doe, Jane Doe sold X amount of dollars, so the company's going to profit X amount of dollars. Security is nothing happens, and that's a good thing. That's success.
Or we need to change that. And that goes to probably one of the other future questions you're going to ask me about. If I could have like one thing and then I can retire, I don't want security to be a cost center anymore, especially like we can use the example of cyber insurance now. It's impossible. Okay. So if you're able to level up your security program and work all the vectors that we've been chatting about, and say to the people that you're trying to get business with, we vet supply chain, we do this, we hunt for risk every single week. We're constantly upgrading and tweaking our perimeter, sensors, we only work with, super cleared subcontractors, or however you say it. So if you go do business with us, chances are your stuff's going to stay safe. It should be value added to what your company does, not a cost center. It should be like, we do all this stuff to make sure your product will turn out 100% what it's supposed to be, delivered uncompromised. You know what I mean? It'll be what it needs to be. So I want to get away from being a cost center.
Preach. I hope
I'm probably only going to lose 5 pounds with that goal. How's that? Maybe a half a pound. I don't know.
Hey, success is success as long as we continue to move the needle forward. Because I'll ask you this, but I'll state my personal stance on this first, is that I think we've moved from probably 5 to 8 years ago, where data breaches really started to hit the news, and it was like every week, and everyone's panicking. You know, the wallets and purses that prevent intruders from being able to access your credit cards from the tap to pay and things like that really started to explode. People saw a lot of value in that. I feel now that we as a society, like all of us collectively together, have heard data breaches so much that we've now stopped caring. I think collectively it's just kind of like, hey, there's another data breach. It's like, there was 5 last week, so
Right.
why should I care when this is continuously happening? And I feel that's feeding into our cost center problem, where everybody has, and even security professionals, we've preached that, hey, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And so executives hear that and they think, well, why should we invest, twice as much as we're currently investing when it's going to happen anyway? We could spend a lot and have it happen, or we can spend a little and have it happen. What is your response to what my personal feeling is? That's where we are, or that's where we're headed. Kind of a pessimistic view, but that's why I think we are.
I did a presentation yesterday to a big company, and one of my colleagues put up a slide, and if I had it, or he'd let me share it, I'd put it up for you. It's a graph. It shows, people just kind of hide their head in the sand and say, we're just going to roll the dice, and they do nothing. And then there are people that spike up and will accept no risk, and they're probably going to go out of business because they just can't afford all the different. And then there are people that are in the middle of the road, the managed risk part. We spike, we're down, we let up a little over here, we increase it over there. Colonial Pipeline was targeted, but not targeted, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? They weren't targeted because of who they were just targeted because they could be exploited. And so when, like I say, I'm in the national security realm, there's, state sponsors who have armies of people just trying to hack different. And, if you see the reports about how many port hits you got that day, and there are like millions of them from different countries, I look at those reports and say, ooh, and the countries weirdly spike sometimes. Like, man, we got a bazillion spikes out of Germany. Why is that? And there'll be something, the Olympics, something crazy. And so I think that people are numb. For as long as I first started in the FBI, I was a cyber agent, and hacks were occurring back then, but they were small things. They never got the publicity. It's kind of sad that maybe if we got the publicity on those hacks, back, before 9/11 or late, 1990s, maybe we would have kind of mastered this by now. And that's why I get a little frustrated with cybersecurity professionals. Like, we've been working on this for 3 decades and it's still happening. Like, seriously, like, fix it. And so you can't get numb. I mean, being in law enforcement, it's kind of like there was another shooting today. There's you just can't give up. You just got to keep trying, because every little bit that everybody does, and if we come together and as a community and say, listen, this bad thing happened to me, and I'm embarrassed that it happened to me, but I want to share it with the community and say, listen, guys, I thought this wasn't important and they got me on this port, or because I didn't update this thing. I want to make sure you guys go out and update it. But everybody kind of hides in their little place and is embarrassed and never communicates with the world.
Oh, I agree with that. That's something I am passionate about, is that whenever an incident happens, I'm always curious to how, not to point and shame the company, because we may be doing the same thing. If it happens to a defense contractor, pretty confident it could happen to us, because I need to figure out where we're good at, where we're not good at, and it's very difficult if we are all siloed off from each other and no one wants to communicate how these things are happening. So the attacker, they had company A, then company B, then company C, and it's the same play, just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat.
Yes.
Like I'm a football fan, and so it's like they're continuously, literally running the same play and scoring touchdowns. Like, when are we going to do something to stop this?
Well, I think we talked once is like, we see an uptick in smishing now and an uptick in phishing. And so my team who actually creates, we subscribe and I recommend, there are companies that have these phishing programs that you can put on your email systems. And it's competition, I'm telling you here. And their goal is to make me click on it. And I've clicked on it. I have. I think they're tracking my emails and they're saying, oh, she's expecting something. Let's write an email kind of like that and have her click on the link, And so I'm like, I need them back. And I'm like, you guys got me good this time. You know what I mean? And then we put out a PSA to everybody, like, be conscientious during the holidays. Like a friend hasn't talked to you in a long time. They want to wish you a happy greeting. Here's a virtual greeting card. Don't click on it.
Yes. The shaming in phishing to me is just one of the most asinine things we as technology or even just security professionals can do. We've looked at phishing attacks. Phishing's still the #1 attack vector for any organization, and it's consistently that way because it's an attack on people. Because people are our biggest strengths, but also we're flawed. And so as if your organization has anything of value, and I mean, whether it's money, whether it's secrets or something in between, you need to understand that. And one of the ways to get that is through people. So if you're a small business and you think, well, who would want to attack us? Why would they even attempt to phish us? But you profit like $200,000. That $200,000 is still plenty. It's still plenty. It's still plenty to attack. And us being in a period where there's a death of distance, where the distance between myself and MJ is kind of gone. I can just communicate with you via email, via message, as long as I know first name, last name, whatever, first name at whatever, you can communicate with these people. And so everybody is so accessible 24/7 that this particular problem that we're facing is absolutely killing us right now.
Well, we're talking about all the things you can do with security and you don't get the right funding and blah. I could get like an unlimited budget and do awesome things here, right? But one thing that I warn people about is LinkedIn. Okay. So I would tell you, I get quite my fair share of LinkedIn, hi, you don't know me, you're awesome, you're wonderful, your background, you're amazing, blah, blah, blah. We'd love you to review our security program, something crazy like that. Well, I know what that is. I cut and paste the link and I send it to my cyber guys, and the last one they looked it up and it was a keylogger.
Wow. Yeah.
Don't click on links in messaging in LinkedIn.
Oh, definitely. I love you bring up LinkedIn, because LinkedIn it tells you who you are and it tells your experience. And if they can deductively reason, are you a feasible target? Like, what could you possibly know? And so, like, if it's someone's LinkedIn and it's director of whatever security for a 3-letter agency for 10 years, that is just, if there's an adversary looking, it gives them kind of the playbook of what could possibly be there. Not now, but what could have been there before? What could this person potentially know? Who could they be connected with? Because LinkedIn can take you from point A to point Z just through a few messages. And so we give so much information of ourselves via open source, like the open source intelligence part. We give so much of ourselves out there.
So I love LinkedIn. It's how you network. And so I use it for the good reasons, but I tell people be very be very cautious. There's a lot of people out there that don't understand, like they're getting these solicitations and like, you know, you're an engineer, we're a consultant company, we have a client that really wants to learn more about these things. Would you be willing to talk to us for an hour for $300? And so I have people that, you know, they're getting it now because I put a lot of PSAs about this, but they're getting it. Like, how do you know the competition wasn't hired by this company to figure out how we're doing our propulsion system? How do you know that? And they're like, I don't. Well, then you just potentially gave intellectual property away to a competitor, a foreign adversary, or whatever. You don't know who that company is that you've just consulted for. So you really have to understand how you're using LinkedIn. And it's always amazing that the person reaching out to me is like the hottest looking guy on the planet. And he thinks I'm awesome. So
yeah. Yeah, there's various principles of influence for people. And one of those principles of influence, one of the most profound, is liking. If you like someone, they'll influence your behavior. And so, of course, they're going to pick a picture of a very, very attractive person because you're more likely to interact with that person for business reasons or personal reasons. You're definitely going to do that. I imagine if they sent you that same message and it's just some random person with some Kool-Aid mustache, just looking creepily into the camera, that it's going to be an immediate like no, that feels very uncomfortable to me, so I'm not going to click that. So yeah, they prey on those various principles of influence to get people to click, to get people to interact, whether it's clicking or whether it's to get a message back, whether the adversary knows it or not. That principle of influence is there, not for just you and I, but for everybody. Like anybody listening, we all have that principle of influence.
All right. So that's another vector, and I educate the employees here about LinkedIn's a great tool, but it also can be used for the wrong reasons, and just be conscientious about that.
Definitely. So you're also very knowledgeable on, we spoke briefly about counterintelligence, and I know you can speak in depth to national security counterintelligence, but at a high level, how do you view counterintelligence, to give us some pointers or educate us on how do you view counterintelligence and what do you pick out to utilize? What's useful information to you?
So, I mean, you know, my old world, you know, I think people think it's spy versus spy, but it's not really like that. You know, I think you'll see in some, you know, we're kind of in a, you know, asymmetric war right now, you know, economic warfare, you know, trying to find information about somebody else or another company to either steal the intellectual property or put the company out of business, you know, recruiting an employee to give you information. You know, I've tried to tell people, you know, you don't have to go after the president sometimes, you know, it's that counterintelligence would be targeting his executive assistant. You know what I mean? And say, listen, we want to recruit you. We know you're a single mom, whatever, you need money. Can you just tell us when he's out of the office or something like that? These are all, you know, getting pieces of information that would give you an advantage, you know, but it's not like one and done. That's why I try to tell people, as soon as, like anybody, even a criminal organization, as soon as you figure out how they're doing something, they shut all that down and they create a new program. And you see this, like, you know, on the dark web, you know what I mean? Like, you know, you think it's all packaged up and they just change their name and they change some of what they do. You know, we're always trying to collect bits and pieces of, it's a chess game, bits and pieces of information to see what potentially the next move might be, How do you, it's strategic. And so, when I was working counterterrorism, people are here looking for the terrorist. I'm out here in doing metadata. And so, to be frank with you, and this is how I operate in a world that I can't really contribute, is that when I was over in Iraq, we were working and seizing a lot of like laptops and things like that. And I don't know, the only two things that were on the laptops were Arabic and pornography. That was it. And I couldn't read Arabic, and but I struggle with problem solving, and not struggle with it. That's what I'm actually good at, but I don't want to give up on the problem. And so what I tended to do is study the problem long enough, and how I was very successful there was focusing on the metadata. So I didn't focus on the content of the computer as much as, this is a Toshiba laptop. Where are they made? There's a serial number on it. There's a MAC code on it. Let's work on that part of it to find out if we can find the origins of the laptop, and therefore find out who owned it, the supply chain, the financing part of it. Also, like on the porn side of the house, as much as this might not offend some of your people, there's paid for services. People use credit cards, so if you actually look at my thing was the spam folder. I went to the spam folder, and it would say like, welcome for joining, beautifulwomen.com. And I would go to that, and it would say requires a credit card. Visa and a MasterCard are an American company. So we could subpoena those companies, that credit card company, and say, can you give me information on this IP address, who accesses from this address? And then we could continue our investigation. So I really come out way out with the metadata and get those bits and pieces, and they start to build this puzzle and this network and this schematic, and it kind of starts to bring you into the center of the problem. And that's, so I've always worked in bits and pieces. So I've always kind of gotten assigned maybe the hard problems. And so I don't want people to be put off because they've got a security challenge now, and they're like, all I have in front of me is a pencil and a blank piece of paper. There is an answer there. You just need to leave yourself a little bit and figure out, where am I going to start? And it might start in the most, the oddest place, but you need to explore those.
Well, sounds absolutely fascinating. Do you feel that's a proverbial like muscle you can exercise? Is that something that you learned, and you learned what to look at, what not to look at, what pieces may be like false positives, what's actually something you can run with? Is that something you could practice to get good at?
Well, I think everybody's watched like detective movies on TV, and they see the wall with all the pictures and the close-ups and the thread and all. Well, it's kind of a real thing. You stare at it so long and you can't see it anymore. Remember when you're looking for something and you can't remember a name, or you can't, and if you walk away from it and then you come back, you figure it out right away. That's like a real thing. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I couldn't see this. My thing was, learning about barcodes. I learned about what are barcodes? Everybody uses them. Companies use them to track inventory, to track the origins of inventory. If something should be considered bad or need to be recalled, they knew who to recall it from. So here I am in Iraq on an objective, and there's like a thing with a barcode on it. I was all about barcodes. I knew everything about barcodes. And so I used it to find the company, who paid for it, who picked it up, where did it get mailed to, who mailed to those addresses. You just keep working your way out. But I had to study a piece of information and learn way out here about inventory control to come way in here to improve the security program.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's so interesting. I could talk to you for hours about that, because I would love to hear like your deductive reasoning process through that. It's absolutely fascinating. But I know one thing we're both passionate about is understanding not just security, not just talking cyber here. We're talking security as a discipline in its entirety. And I know you have a thought on who owns security and how much onus is being placed in like one particular area, like the CIO.
Mhm.
How do you feel about the CIO owning security? I know there's a huge emphasis on this on the cyber side, but they also take emphasis on like the physical security side, the counterintelligence side, and just the intelligence side. What are your thoughts on the onus of the CIO of security?
Well, everybody's going to hate me, and you have to be brave, step up. All you security people out there, be brave. Um, the CIO was created for a real purpose. I don't, probably better than me because you're a doctor. What, 30 years ago? Um, I don't know. They became the person because not everybody understood computer technology. But now everybody pretty much understands it. I don't haven't studied it an iota and I understand some of it. But I also feel for the CIO. Whenever a company, ransomware attack, who's the first person to like get the axe? The CIO. You know what I mean? He should have had that network locked down. But maybe it wasn't his fault. Maybe he did everything he was supposed to do within the parameters of being the chief information officer, taking care of the network, looking down on the networking, making sure all the patches and updates are working accordingly. He did all that and he was still compromised because I think he's looking down. Nobody's looking out. Like, who's looking at the risk and the threat? Who's looking at supply chain? Who's looking at the weather? Is our data center going to be taken out? Do we have a hurricane coming? Do we have a strike? Do we have civil unrest? Who's going to, breach the gate here? Who's the insider threat? Are we working with HR to make sure, Joey over there is mad now because he didn't get a raise? Like, is the CIO doing all that? I don't think so.
Wow.
You know?
So do you feel there's a need to create something new? Is there like a new position you would advocate for, someone that could look at all of that?
So I think it has to be, a person. It could be a CIO, it could be a security professional. I mean, they obviously have to be skilled in understanding risk, resilience, um, security, insider threat. I mean, we don't come with all those skills. We come with some core skills. I come with core skills. You come with core skills. But I could build a team where I have a really good, solid, cybersecurity person or IT person or facility security, an intelligence person. I mean, I think every company should hire someone that's had experience in intelligence and understanding open source. I mean, they're separating from the military every day. So hire a, separating military intelligence person to be a part of your security team. I don't like the word security. I think it comes with all the wrong kinds of negative connotations. I think there needs to be a new elevated person that sits in the C-suite that can tell the CEO, these are the risks we're looking at this week. Real threats, supply chain diversity, something's going on in India. We need to make sure that we're not 100% reliant on whatever microelectronics or whatever are coming out of India because we're probably not going to get them. I'm not sure the CIO is saying that.
Yeah, I
You
think
know what I mean?
I think you're right, and this is me just speaking humbly and honestly from the cyber side. When there's a lot from the supply chain, because as you state, we all come with core skills, and based on my background and where I came from, there's a huge gap in my game. And it's a lot of what you're speaking to. There's a huge gap in my game when we're talking technology. I could speak all day about it, but when you start talking counterintelligence and supply chain, I can kind of speak to it, but then very quickly my knowledge gets very shallow. You'll tap me out very, very quick. And I agree, there's a knowledge gap that a lot of organizations aren't filling. Some of them they may have something like this, if they have something like that, I don't think it's at the executive level that you're speaking to, that it's probably someone speaking to the CIO and hoping they can parrot that or regurgitate that to the CEO. But I don't think the CEO is getting that information directly.
Well, I think in the CIO world, they're always talking about, what's going to be our business continuity plan, how are we going to recover from a ransomware attack. I said, why don't we take the angle like we're never going to get hit, okay? We're never going to get compromised. Why? It's because we're stepping out away from it a little bit and we're looking at it strategically. What could come at us? And then prioritize the risk. Like you said, we don't get a big budget. So we are least likely to look at the most trusted people because they're trusted. And so we'll put them at the bottom of the list. But then come way out here, like on subcontractors or supply chain or access control or joint ventures or acquisitions. I mean, we need to look out there. I mean, look at the Marriott Starwood model. Marriott acquired Starwood, but they didn't do a risk assessment. And so Starwood had already been compromised and they ingested it and it cost them a lot of money. I know, we all have car insurance and insurance on our homes. We hope we never use our insurance on our cars or our house never burns down. But I try to explain to them there, it's, what is it? Low risk, high consequences. You know what I mean? So we talked about, and this, it does happen out there, but the Pensacola active shooting, low risk, incredibly high consequence. So that event, once it occurred, the facility, the area which it occurred was shut down for 40 days. And the area where that shooting occurred, the building has never opened again. Like people don't want to go in the building. So low consequence, low risk, super high consequence. You as a security professional in the C-suite need to make those decisions.
Yeah, yes, that's very, I feel those conversations are not happening. At least in the executive suites that I have knowledge of. So this chief risk officer, this chief resiliency officer, I know you're stepping out and you say, hey, I think this is a thing. I'll stand with you on that. I think there's a security, like if there's a chief security officer in an organization, that's a very umbrella term with a lot of different disciplines. And that's a lot of reliance on one person being great at a lot of things and being able to speak to a lot of things. So I co-sign for being able to split that out, to say, hey, the cyber side, it does deserve its spot and may need to exist there. But there's also this other side. There's these other things that are going on, and this one person to speak to all of it. There's probably very few people on the planet that can do it at a level to give each discipline its proper due and respect for the executive, for the organization.
Well, maybe they can't. Maybe they can only do 10%. But I can tell you what it is right now. Not much. You know what I mean? Except if you're like weirdly like me, I was with the president yesterday saying, and he's like, MJ, I know security on steroids, but it's still, if you can do like 10 sit-ups today, that's more than you did yesterday. Okay. So just every little bit counts, you know what I mean? So, yes, it is. But I think we need to embrace the fact that we're not really resolving the issue. You know what I mean? So it needs to be a person that builds a team with all those little lanes of expertise, or has a dotted line in the org chart to a POC that's embedded with maybe you take a really good security person who understands technology and you embed them in procurement. And their job will only be to vet supply chain, blah, blah, blah. They understand it, they know it, and they dotted line back like this is clear to go. Maybe you have a dotted line to, general counsel for mergers and acquisitions, if depending on the size of your company, but or something like you meet with them once a week or once a month, and then you just have this connectivity throughout the company, and that's kind of like, instead of having everything siloed, and then something blows up and everybody points the finger at that group like they didn't do their job.
Yeah, that's I love that. I wouldn't call it utopian. That's an area that's a dream to push. That's a dream to push for. So I will ask, and I'm asking this very open-ended. Feel free to say no, thank you. Is there any examples you could speak to or provide of speaking, like what areas should we look for? Like if someone's like, hey, I would love to design this chief resiliency officer, this chief risk officer, what they would talk about. What do you have any examples of, hey, we could have looked at this, or a company should have looked at this and they didn't?
I think if I take it down a notch and just kind of to the average security person in a company that's not dealing with clearances or Department of Defense, cyber security. Okay, ready? I'm glad this is Zoom, because if it was an audience, they'd be throwing things at me. Cybersecurity and IT have to be apart from each other. You know what I mean? Cybersecurity, they can't be underneath one another. They have to be apart from each other. And when you're doing that, I think if you can only do one thing today, I would try to learn more about your supply chain. Do you know what I mean? Learn more about your supply chain. The whole thing now under this administration with the SBOM, bill of materials now for code. If you're going to purchase, software, unique software for your company, you really just need to understand the software bill of materials to understand where the compromise might be in there. I mean, don't try to build something brand new today, but try to create a bridge between you and procurement today. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just build one bridge today. That's it.
That is a quote. That is a quote to live by. Build one bridge today. Should put that on a poster.
Okay, you can have it. It's yours.
Hey, I'm gonna take that one. You can have back. Be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Okay,
we'll swap that.
So that's where I would start. Go ahead.
So with this being the Mic Club, for us being in minorities in cyber, this is a lot of people view it as a quote unquote male dominated industry. What advice, what have you done? What have you seen to get more women in cyber? Because us dudes, we've given it our best shot. If this is male dominated, and part of me, I feel it is hiring. There's a lot more men applicants than female applicants. We've done the best we can, and yet here we are. Like, stuff is going to hell in a handbasket. What advice do you have for women if there's a female watching this saying, hey, I would love to aspire to be like MJ one day, to get more women in this industry, whether it's cybersecurity, intelligence, or just security in general?
So I'm going to give you a gem today, and I've never said this publicly, because I don't know, maybe hurt feelings. I have no idea. So when we started our conversation today, it was like, how does someone get to be MJ, a senior executive? And eventually I'm sure somebody in the FBI will watch this video. But of the 3 promotions that matter to get you to the position of senior executive, there are 3 of them. Squad supervisor, assistant special agent in charge, and then you're a senior executive. In those 3 positions, I've never been promoted by a white male. I was promoted by 2 women and a Black male. Okay, so I understand, and that's why I'm here today, how difficult it is to get promoted. As smart as I might appear to be, okay, it's still incredibly challenging to get your voice heard or to be elevated. And I feel as it's a duty to me to be here today. And the only way women and minorities get promoted is we have to pull each other up. So you may not find the perfect candidate. I've always tended to promote introverts, incredibly smart people, but they're very quiet, with a goal of getting them to be more outspoken and sit up, and have a voice. But we need to pull each other up. And I would rather have a person that's super hardworking, super curious, super wanting to learn more. I don't know anything about cybersecurity. I want to learn all about it. What is this thing called counterintelligence? Versus somebody, who knows it all, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of need to support each other and pull each other up. I've had a lot of great mentors in my career, a lot of white male mentors, lots of great people. But, it's weird that in the organization, it's a lot of women, but as you get to the top, there seems to be less and less minorities as you get to the top. And that's kind of a struggle. So if there's anything I can contribute to someone, even here today, like one person watching this today, like a light bulb goes off, then I've done my job. And I'm happy to continue to do that job.
Oh, that is amazing, heartbreaking, fulfilling. Thank you so much for sharing that, because that's a reality a lot of people live in. One of the people that had changed the complete trajectory of my career was a woman, was a white woman that said, you know what, we're gonna take a chance and promote him. Was I 100% ready for the job? No, I wasn't. Did I check every single box? No, I didn't. And her doing that 100% changed my life, made me feel like, hey, I could do this, work hard to get better at it, to check all the boxes. And then from there it was no looking back. So I 100% cause I'm thinking about the same things you said, like, have all my promotions been from women or minorities? And yes, now think about it. Yes.
And so it's just weird. It's a weird thing. I did a women's leadership thing like a couple of weeks ago, and one of the girls asked me, like, they want me to get promoted, but I'm not ready for the promotion. Do you think I should take it? And I said, well, why do you think you're getting promoted? And they said, I think they're trying to improve the diversity statistics. And I'm like, well, don't take any job that you either like you. I've taken jobs, I'm terrified. I have no idea what to do with this job. But you start reading, you start talking to people that have experience in the job, you start doing your due diligence, you start improving us, and then you start to learn it. But I would be offended if I got promoted just because, hey, we got a stat we have to check. I mean, I'm a female veteran. You get 2 points for that. You know what I mean? So it's like, I want to be promoted because we see you as having lots of potential. You're curious. You have a great work ethic. You're always asking very interesting questions. You're here on time, all those kinds of things. And then I want to invest in a person and make them successful. I mean, when you get like long tooth in your career, like I am, the only thing I can do is pass my knowledge and my skills and my advice on to this younger generation and say, listen, these are the pitfalls I made. Please don't make them. But these are some paths you can journey on and you'll be successful.
Wow. That is absolutely incredible. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And before we close out, I want to ask, is there anything else you would like to add? Anything we didn't talk about that you would like to have a brief conversation on?
No, I just didn't want people to understand that security is a journey. And if you're going to be good at it, you gotta fight it every day. You know what I mean? I think we're not mall cops. You know what I mean? And even mall cops have a hard job. You know what I mean? With all these, what do they call them? Smash and grabs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, don't get into security to be comfortable. Because if you don't do your job to the best of your ability, and you are the unlucky ones, your company, to have any one of these bad events happen, I'm not sure some days they're recoverable. Do you know what I mean? You'll just maybe never recover from it. At least I can say I did everything I possibly could, and it still happened to us. So it just wasn't in the cards, or it was a new vector that we never even thought about. I think about these, what are they called? I can't believe you're videoing this and I'm having a mind gap right now. The remote control things that fly around.
The drones.
So
Yes.
drones are my thing these days, like drones with a payload. I have to worry about, is someone on the other side of the river with a drone and a payload? I mean, I'm like, okay, maybe I have to put it way in the low risk pile, because, I don't know, I can't deal with that one today. And plus there's no solution for taking out drones. So it's not like I could buy it anyway. Just security is a constant battle, constant fighting, in a good way, fighting the enemy, not fighting your boss. In a world, and being curious and asking a lot of questions. So I hope people are getting energized.
Oh, I for sure am. I 100% love what you're about, love what you've done, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge, sharing your experiences. Thank you, wholeheartedly. Thank you so much. And for those listening, please, down in the comment section, I always encourage you all to keep this conversation going. Security, we need help. So let's take whatever gem you have, whatever piece, and let's start a conversation about that so we can continue to grow together. Being outside in the silos and say, hey, I'm gonna take this and just hold on to it for myself isn't doing other organizations any good. And we're all interconnected. At some point in time, we're all these organizations are interconnected together. So keep the conversation going. And as always, this is Dr. Erik Huffman from the Mic Club. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you next time. Much love.
Thank you.